Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all of you. I hope you've had a nice lunch and a good coffee. It's always a tough call to have a panel afterwards when it's siesta time, but I hope we will survive. It gives me great pleasure to moderate this panel this afternoon. My name is Ivan Vejvoda. I'm a permanent fellow at the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna, otherwise from the region, from Belgrade, and from a country that no longer exists called Yugoslavia. The title of this panel is Hip Hope, Reimagining the Future in the Balkans, and our intention is to actually say some of the positive things that are happening in the region. As you know, as the cliche goes, good news is no news, and so we only get kind of negative or doom and gloom, no future, big difficulties, authoritarian tendencies, unresolved bilateral issues. We pretend to reform, the EU pretends to accept us as members, and so we, not disregarding, of course, the realities that we confront, we would like to open up to different issues that are not talked about every day. And I'm very glad, and I hear from our organizers that there are very many of you in the audience from the region, of a younger generation, and I hope that we engage you after an initial round of introductions and initial thoughts in an exchange. This format of this panel comes under the European Alpbach forum called Chat. So we will try and chat and not only be a panel speaking to you from here. I'd like to very briefly introduce our speakers. You have their more detailed bios in the European Forum Alpbach app. I'll start from my far left. Erjon Veliaj, who is the mayor of the capital of Albania, Tirana, a long-time activist, NGO leader, slowly moved through his career to become a politician with the Socialist Party and is today a very successful mayor, and I hope we hear a lot about Nika Kovac. To my immediate left is the founding director of 8th of March Research Institute. For those of you who don't know what the 8th of March is, it's International Women's Day. And we just realized that even though we met for the first time, we've known each other through intermediary, very, very close friends. And I was hearing the very exciting and dramatic things that Nika has been involved in. Milica Delevic, to my immediate right, very old friends, if I dare say, I mean young friends. Milica has had a long-standing career in Serbia on EU integration affairs, had many high office positions for many years, and for the past 12 years she's been at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in London on a variety of important positions. Last but not least, again an old friend, and if I may, Miro, we've been friends for more than 20 years when Miroslav Lajčák was ambassador of his country, Slovakia, to Belgrade. He is now the official representative negotiator on Belgrade-Pristina and other Balkan affairs. Truly, in the best sense of the word, a veteran of our region, a supporter of the EU integration of our whole region, and has done many things in between at the EU in Brussels and in other international organizations, and was, of course, foreign minister of his country, Slovakia. So please welcome our panel here. And so we'll do a brief 5 to 7 minute introductory thoughts on I would suggest this, what is the positive thing that you see in the region and in your specific surroundings, and if you have or engaged on civic activities or with younger people or not younger people, because I think this is cross-generational. Of course, the future is with the youth. Na mladima svet ostaje, as we say in our language. The world belongs to the young people. It also requires this cross-generational approach with a little, gray hairs that we have and some experience. There's maybe some things that we can pass on as the lectures, as the lessons that we have learned. So I'll ask Nika to kick us off here as the youngest person on this panel.
Okay, hi to all of you. So I'm coming from Slovenia, quite a small country with 1.8 million people, and I see hope there every day. And hope for me is the community, which comes together around different issues, which are universal, which are common good, which is like life full of dignity. And for me, the hope is not in the youth. It's not in the younger generation alone, because what I learned in the movement which we are leading with my organization in Slovenia, we led 2 winning referendums, the biggest Get Out and Vote campaign. Right now we are leading the whole European campaign, is not in the young people coming together, but young people, students, and retired people. 60% of our volunteers are older than 70. They are all amazing old women and men who decided to change the world for their grandsons and granddaughters. And I think that the hope is in this special kind of cooperation and standing together on the street, collecting signatures for petitions, collecting signatures for different changes. And I think we need to be more cautious on this generation, which is so often invisible, but they are the real badasses.
That was very short.
You want me to?
No, that's fine. Let's go to Arion. Arion, reflecting on what I just said about you, that you started out really as a civic leader, and I'm glad to have had the opportunity to be among the donors that supported your movement called MIAFT, meaning enough, in your home country, and then the movement. What is it that you found exhilarating in the civic work, and then what made you move into the sphere of politics, while of course not forgetting the importance of civil society?
Thank you, Ivan. You got me to think. It's been exactly 10 years that I spent in civil society, or in plain terms, trying to overthrow the government, and another 10 years trying to build the government, which I think the latter one tends to be a bit more difficult. And it requires bigger consensus. But as I was coming through this weather, I said, thank God I'm not the mayor of Albach, which would have been a very gloomy, not only weather-wise, but it's too perfect. And I think to be a mayor in Austria and Switzerland must really be a punishment. There's nothing exciting going on other than people complaining about the weather. And I think to be in the Balkans, which has so much going on, and there has so much opportunity to inject hope and new energy, provoke a debate, start a rally, have these confronting views. I find it exhilarating. So modesty aside, I think I have the most fun job of everyone in the room. And so if anyone is thinking about getting engaged in politics, try as mayor. Ministers and diplomats, with all due respect, are a bit like those big oceanic ships. It takes forever to take a turn. Being a mayor is like riding a bike. You're agile, you take quick turns, you get feedback immediately, either the middle finger or a hug, depending on how happy people are with the one-way street or the bike lane and so on and so forth. But jokes aside, I think we've come a long way, even, from those days. I really think, I think of Tirana, because I can only speak of the city that I run. And why cities are important in this conversation. And here, I want to maybe provoke a debate with Miroslav. Because we focus so much on states and nations. and borders. And I'm not saying that they're not important, but I would say 19th century was the century of empires, right? The Austro-Hungarian Empire, the British Empire, the Ottoman Empire, which we in the Balkans know very well. And then the 20th century was the century of states. The Republic of Albania, the Yugoslav Republic, or former Yugoslavia, now the Republic of Serbia, of Croatia, of Slovakia. I think now we live in a century of cities, because cities, you know, people don't say I'm moving from Albania to America. People say I'm moving from Tirana to New York. And more people feel connected a lot more to the city than, you know, 19th century empire mentality or 20th century nation-state mentality. So in this cosmopolitan day and age, to run a city that is officially one of the youngest cities in Europe, but also that was the most isolated city in Europe. I mean, to go to Albania, and you had to be a really hardcore Marxist-Leninist, be vetted by all the Marxist associations of Central Eastern Europe, arrive in Tirana, get your haircut and your beard taken off, make sure your pants didn't look like cowboy pants, and make sure that someone from the security apparatus escorted you and pretty much controlled your visit to meet your comrades in the Communist Party. Now, to be the city with almost 200 flights a day, last year we had about 10 million tourists, now we're aiming about 14 million. We were the European youth capital 2 years ago, sports capital a year ago. Next year we're the Mediterranean capital of culture. I'm not saying this because of naivete. I know there's a lot of challenges in the region, but one has to realize how much things have changed. And I think Tirana or Albania is the little engine that could. It's almost that Cinderella story of the country that you would never bet 1 cent that could ever make it. And here you are. All of a sudden, I remember growing up in the 90s, we were the largest exporter of drama in the region. And now it's so stable, it's almost boring. I mean, of course we have our hyper-Balkan debates, but in terms of getting stuff done, in terms of having a society that works, in terms of having rule of law, we've come a long way. And I look at around the region to see other countries having their own bone to pick. And I think if Albania could do it, if the North Korea of Europe could do it, if the Pyongyang of this North Korea could become a European capital of anything, I think it speaks volumes of our ability to change. Not the ability of Europe to change us, but our ability to change ourselves. And in this doom of gloom of Europe, where people say, what are you doing for the European Union? And I say, I'm just cleaning out the garbage, making sure the sewage flows in the right direction, the buses show up in time, the kindergartens work, and we're planting trees. Because I think treating Europe as a destination away from us, like we're all going on a big train to Brussels, I think is the wrong attitude. I understand my European vocation as fixing my own piece of the puzzle, which is the city of Tirana, and make sure that that is an island of Europe in this big mess that we call the Balkans. And if everybody obsessed about fixing their own piece of the puzzle, then the whole picture would work out. And I'm afraid that for too long, you know, this obsession with nation states and the rules and norms of nation states has left out major dynamism that happens in cities. Now, nation states may not see eye to eye, but you know, the mayor of Belgrade and the mayor of Pristina and the mayor of Skopje and the mayor of Tirana and Podgorica and Sarajevo pretty much have to do the same thing and deliver on the same premises for their own citizens. So I see a lot of hopes in the city coalitions, in the great energy in the cities. We were talking, to finish my minute, we were talking during lunch about Ricardo Hausmann. The Center for International Development at Harvard has this great tool called the Atlas of Economic Complexity. So basically they scan your city or your state or your region and find out what they produce. So we did this in 2015 when our administration took over the city. In 2015, 25% of the GDP of Tirana, of the output of the city, was textile. The other 25% was shoes. So literally 250 euro jobs that could at any time go to Vietnam or Bangladesh, that had zero skills transferred because Armani and Versace already cut their pieces before they sent them to Tirana to be sewn. And that was the economy, only 10 years ago. 10 years is not a long time. Now we did the same exercise with Ricardo. 25% of the city now, of the city's output, tourism. Of course, it comes with the craze of the Airbnbs and trying to fight gentrification, but this is first world problems. This is the same problem Barcelona is having, right? And to be discussing the same thing in the Balkans, that means we've come to that level to worry about these things. The other 25% is IT. Enver Hoxha's famous pyramid is now the largest IT academic center for free for kids in the Balkans. So if you go to the Tumo Center, you are 12 to 18, you get free courses. Tirana considers this a digital human right to make sure that we don't prepare the next generation of shoe and textile knitters, but the next generation of coders, augmented reality, virtual reality, and software engineers, and the jobs of the future. So I know it sounds like a bit of an overdose of sugar, so I don't want to cause you moral diabetes, but I think there is reasons for hope. And if it can happen in the most miserable place that came out last from the communist period, I think it can happen anywhere with the right attitude and with this fantastic motivation. We were a bunch of young people, I remember from Yaft, we're 22, 23. We probably got a lot of things wrong, except for the fact that we didn't want to sit idle and we wanted to be active. And I see such great ferment, not only in civil society. We found out with Andy a couple of years ago that the girl behind ChatGPT, OpenAI, was this Albanian girl, Mira Murati. But she couldn't be successful in the Albania that she left. And she could be successful because she went to the United States. And of course, you know, for the others here, the Dua Lipas and the Rita Ora. So you always wonder, why is this talent doing so well outside? And what can we do to prepare that bed so that these seeds can... So now we say, well, look, if our young girls are doing amazing things, then maybe, you know, we should teach more coding and we should teach a lot more these skills, and then we should make sure that the start is equal for everyone, so the city will pay the scholarship, and then whosoever can run faster should be able to do so. And since I am here making a pitch about the tourism, I really expect you to come and visit this year before it's too late, and you're the only one who hasn't been to Tirana. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for that shot of sugar, badly needed after lunch. I think it's very important to say that there is a lot of energy, and I think your final question was the important one. What do we do to create in our societies the reasons for younger people to stay rather than to leave? And that involves a lot of things. And just before I give the floor to Milica, I cannot not recall that I did my first hearing in the US Senate Foreign Relations Committee 20 years ago, in 2004, and there was a certain senator presiding called Joe Biden, and there was another senator, George Voinovich, who unfortunately passed away, who was a great admirer and supporter of our region. And the title of the hearing in the Foreign Relations Committee was Unfinished Business in the Balkans. Here we are 20 years later. There's still a lot of unfinished business, but I mention it because in that hearing, which you can find in the archives, I said the following. I said, there's an unsung story in the Balkans 20 years ago, and that is regional cooperation. And I still think it's true. There's much more that goes on than the eye can see. There's so much more cooperation, whether artists, sports, young people, not to mention businesses. There's a lot of cross investments that are going on, and I think that's the kind of story that we need to get out. But before Milica, Nika wants to say something.
Yeah, I didn't know that I have 4 minutes before. So I just wanted to add one thing. Like, we had national elections in Slovenia 2 years ago. And at that time, I was living in New York. I was part of Obama's scholarship program. And I led Get Out and Vote campaign from New York. But one thing that I realized is that in Slovenia, we have this saying like, let's become US, like something really good is happening in US. And when I was there, I realized that the air is bad, that they don't have health insurance, that they pay enormous money for going to the universities, which are not so much better than our universities at the Balkans. And what I learned is that we have like pretty good conditions and that we can be proud on so many things. Like, those people were teaching me how to do democracy, and most of their people cannot vote. So for me, what I developed in US is also like a sense of pride to the Balkans, like a sense of like, hey, we know how to do stuff. And also I learned like the biggest amount of stuff from my colleagues from Balkan, like from other countries, from like what is happening like in Serbia, what is happening like in Croatia, like the movements which are there are amazing and they have the skills. So I think that for sometimes we also need to say like, oh, we are doing well, like certain things are really good and they don't know how to do it, so we can teach them. And I think this is also something like how we do projects in Slovenia, how we do movements, how we build up stuff. Like, I think that like the story of the city which we heard is again a story of like hope, and people need to learn from us, and we need to stand proudly and say there's some finished business here, and we are standing behind it.
Thank you very much for reminding us of that, Nika. Milica, you've been in the trenches of EU integration and been active and with a lot of energy in promoting our country and our region, and you've been a voice of that energy and the need to understand why it's important for the region to become part of the European Union. You've been in London now for many years, and you are a realist, if I can put it like that. You know all the problems better than many of us, seeing it also from the vantage point of the EBRD. But where do you see some of the avenues that can open up this possibility as we tackle the current problems? Mishinda, okay.
Okay, that should be easy. Thank you very much, Ivan. And before this panel, some of us participated in one of the labs, which devoted a lot of time to discussing precisely the issues that we are now generating optimism on, and how should we capture good things in the Western Balkans to resolve those that are still unresolved, and how to harness the energy of the region to promote the region and to keep people within the region and maybe encourage some to return. And I started with something which was an EBRD study on economic convergence, which was produced for a Western Balkan summit, which is something that the EBRD was organizing every other year, and Miroslav knows well. And this study identified 3 issues which we would collectively in the Balkans need to look at in order to enhance development prospects for the region. And these are, first is governance, or rather fixing the institutions. Because if you don't have institutions that work, it's very difficult for this energy, which we have abundance of, to turn into a process which then has concrete policy and political outcomes. The second is regional integration and openness, and the third is going green. So I think for me, these 3 sound reasonable. They happen to coincide with some of the things with the European Union, although we've agreed we're not going to make this into another European Union panel, but it happens to coincide with things that would also be beneficial for the European integration. But I think hopefully, and that I think is the biggest challenge for all of us, to come up with an internal anchor of reform. I think whatever happens to the European integration, I think the whole region really wants to be part of the European Union, but anchoring, having an internal reform driver is an important thing. And these 3 things, I think, would be beneficial, would make it happen. And for me, this day and a half of discussion with a lot of younger people, and now I'm at an age where most of the people are younger than I am, who haven't been part of the problems of the past, you realize that there is a lot of energy, that there is a lot of constructive approach of these issues, and that there is a lot of creativity. And that gives me hope that ultimately this internal reform drive will emerge, and once it emerges, I think the whole story of the European integration will become much easier. Because I think where the European integration didn't serve us well, because we put everything on an external reform driver, and nothing can happen in a society unless you have an internal reform drive. As Arion said, whether the sewage is going in the right system, whether we have a way of producing outcomes, attracting people, making tourists interested in us. And now that I live in the UK, I see challenges that other countries have, similar like Nika. You see some of the things in the region that we can be proud of. but you also see why the region is still attractive for the outside. It's very vibrant, very creative, and it's still not very predictable. So I think the key for us is probably to come at a stage where life is sufficiently predictable that you don't have a problem-solving mission on a daily basis when you're about to do day-to-day tasks. But it's sufficiently unpredictable that it can be creative and fun, where I think we still are, and that for me is the best part of the hope. So in terms of tasks, I would say these three things, which the study identified, but very much times with different recommendations. But in terms of energy, it's keep a bit of that unpredictability while being more predictable on some day-to-day issues.
Okay, thank you very much, Milica, and I hope to hear from some of the younger people once we open up the floor. But before that, let's go to Miroslav Lajčák. Given your experience and given the fact that you are in the engine room of trying to resolve some of the burning unresolved issues of our region, but I'm sure through your extensive travels, you have seen some of the things that are positive, but that do not get much talked about, and the people that you meet, actually, beyond the leaders themselves.
Yes, indeed, and good afternoon, everyone. My personal relationship with the Balkans started 25 years ago, and it never stopped, and it will never stop, because you can leave the Balkans, but the Balkans never leave you. And how can you? Because every time I change my flights in Zurich, there is at least one person from Kosovo who comes to say, hey, Mr. Lajčák, please be nice with Mr. Kurti, we love him. You go to New York, to Smith & Wollensky to have a steak, the waiter is an Albanian from Montenegro. You cross the street in Montreal, there is a person from Bosnia who says, hey, Mr. Lajčák, can we take a picture? So the Balkans are everywhere. And this also shows how unique the region is, really unique, different. In the Western Europe, you very often have the feeling that everything is made of plastic, like the food in Brussels for sure. But also the human relations. Sometimes, like it's very artificial. In the Balkans, everything is real. I mean, the nature is real, the food is definitely real, the problems, unfortunately, are also real. But the human relations are real, and that's so refreshing. And that's a huge virtue of this region. And of course, the most important thing is the young people. I mean, this is, I sometimes have the feeling, and particularly in Kosovo, that even the air is shaking, like it's vibrant. You feel the energy. So many young people who are full of ideas, they don't complain, like in my own country. You talk to people and they only complain. In the Balkans, people have plans. Unfortunately, part of these plans is to project their future outside of the country. I mean, 3 out of 4 university students want to leave their countries because they don't really have hope into the future of their countries. And this is the most important problem that must be addressed, so that you don't have to see yourself in the European Union but outside of your country. The most important thing is that you see your country in the European Union, so you don't have to leave. So what we miss is the hope. And the hope will come when the prospect of European integration and the membership will become real. I know it sounds like a phrase or a cliche, but it's not. I mean, I've been through this process. In my case, in the case of my country, it took us less than 3 years to complete the accession negotiations. And we entered this process as one country and left the process as a different country. You don't notice that, but as you know, like meeting all these conditions and the benchmark, and you don't even notice that it has really transformed your society. And ever since we joined the European Union, I want to offer my knowledge, expertise of this process to help your countries to go through the same process and to achieve. There is no better thing. I mean, as critical as you might be about the European Union, and rightly so, show me what is the better union of countries on this planet. There is none. So that's why this is what needs to be done. Unfortunately, EU has neglected the region for way too long. So the region lost the hope that EU is serious. Now the EU realizes that we might be losing the Balkans, so now we are serious, but we lost credibility in the meantime. So for the first time in my 20+ years, I see European Union more enthusiastic about the enlargement into the Balkans than the Balkans. What I hear from your politicians is, we have been through this, we have heard this, nothing came out of it. We don't trust this time, it's for real. Trust me, this time it's for real, but we need to make it happen. We really have to do our homework on our side. It's not possible that Montenegro and Serbia are in the process for more than 10 years, and they are still in the embryonic stage of the enlargement process. This, obviously, how can you trust this process? We really have to make it very credible, measurable, and quick. And for this, you, people, young people who want to see their future in their countries and in the European Union at the same time, are absolutely instrumental. And let's talk about how to make it happen.
Thank you very much, Miro. That's so important to mention the fact that this process has been so long, and we recall the history of your country, and you had a leader called Mečiar who was going in the wrong direction, but you managed to flip it and become part of the Big Bang enlargement, and in fact joined the euro, which was not the case for the other 4 countries of Visegrad. And I asked our common friend Pavel Demiš once, I was curious suddenly, years later, I said, how come Slovakia joined the euro? He said, we were so behind that we wanted to prove that we were better, so we did everything and joined the euro, which is really incredible, because only Croatia has joined since last year, and Poland and Hungary and the Czech Republic have not joined the euro area. But I'd like to say the fact that we are in this process, and I'd like to quote our friend Remzi Lani, who talks, I think, always very eloquently about these things, talking to his daughter about the slowness of this process and the need for patience and the impatience of the younger generation. And his daughter said to him, Dad, you are older and you're patient and waiting for our country, Albania, to join the European Union, but we younger people are impatient. We want this to happen quickly, and so we join individually. And our friend Ivan Krastev often said, many of you will join individually, go to the European Union and become members of, as our countries stagnate or are moving at a snail's pace in this process. But that's why it's important that we talk about all these good things that are happening and the energy and the creativity. I mean, you mentioned tourism. I mean, there are more and more Serbians who are going for vacation in Albania every year. I think 10,000 last year or something like that. Or the fact that always in Belgrade we talk about how many Slovenians come to spend New Year's in Belgrade, because apparently it's this fantastic thing. I don't go out into the streets on New Year's, but apparently it's very good. So what I'll do, I'll keep my promise. I'll open now the floor to your questions and comments, and I see some hands going up. And do we have microphones to go around? Okay, I see the first hand I saw was here, then over there. Right there first. I'll take 3 questions at a time. Just speak, yeah. Just speak.
Precise, but before answering your question, 2 comments. First of all, I'm still wondering if I should go to Barcelona to Manifesta, which is the European Art Biennale starting in September, because am I welcome or not? That's the big question. Second comment, you mentioned Holly Herndon. We just gave Holly a big prize. The Foreign Ministry kind of made a prize called Art Prize on Digital Human Rights, and she deserves it, as we all understand.
If somebody can explain to me what happened, I have. Okay, let's go to the first question. Do please introduce yourselves.
Your question goes to the room.
Hi, my name is Arbor.
Where's your microphone? Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Arbor. I come from Kosovo. Thank you very much for these beautiful words, but I think that it's really important to address the elephant in the room before we talk about reaching our full potential as a region. And I have a question for you, Mr. Lajčák. I won't ask you to be nice to Mr. Kurdi, but I will probably ask you to ask Peter Stano to be more sensitive when he addresses the people of Kosovo in a statement. I'm kidding. My question to you is, we've had the dialogue, Belgrade and Pristina, which is not the dialogue between cities, as the official term suggests. It's a dialogue between countries. And we've seen that, at least from Kosovars and also from some others, it has been perceived as a bit unequal and a bit biased to one side or the other, you can decide. But my question to you is, when you have a party that is being sanctioned for basically applying its constitution in its territory, and you have a side that has been basically committing an aggression against the country, like in the region, to what extent do you think that this dialogue has been biased and impartial, if it has been impartial at all? Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll take a second question, which was up front here. Yeah. Here, right here in the front row.
Well, my question was actually pretty related to this, but it was more about the expectations of Mr. Lajčák of the dialogue and what is going to happen in the next 5 years, in your opinion.
Okay, and there was a third question over there on that side. If you can pass the microphone, please.
Hello from my side, I'm Dragana Vučković, originally from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and my field of professional and academic path is in the field of European Union and especially Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, so of course that my question is for Mr. Lajčák. But first of all, I have a comment since we spoke about the inter-regional cooperation and connection in the Balkans. I must say that European Commission does a really good thing in Balkans when it comes to young people. Through the regional communication program for Western Balkans, we have a network of young European ambassadors all over the 6 entities of Western Balkans that do really great things from local to national and even regional level, overcoming all potential ethnical and any other divisions. That is really, really great stories that gives a hope for better future and that is different than nowadays political narrative. But my question is regarding debt and this political narrative that is actually opposite of real situation in the field. For Mr. Lajčák, is since I'm from Bosnia and Herzegovina, how much is possible to escalate some things in Kosovo, for example, in terms of security, to be manifested in Bosnia and Herzegovina that is unfortunately divided in those political spectrums, because constantly in that political narrative we are speaking about and we are listening about Kosovo as a hotspot from the side of politicians, but in the field, believe me, I lived there for all my life, in the field the situation is very different. People cooperate with each other and we have really nice things to share with. Thank you.
Okay, I will give the floor to Miroslav Lajčák to answer, but I'd like all the panel to answer in their own way these questions that were posed. So, Miro, please.
Yes, first, I already said in my introductory remarks that I'm not happy with the way European Union was addressing the enlargement process in the last 10 plus years. It has been reduced to a very technical exercise. It lost the emotion, and as I said, it lost the credibility. There is a feeling, very strong feeling in Brussels that the next Commission should have 2 priorities, enlargement and defense. If we want enlargement to succeed, it really has to, we really need to change the parameters of this process and to make it more political and I would say more emotional and more credible. That's very clear thing. Second, the Balkans, of course, is interlinked, and the countries are watching each other, and therefore, I believe that the success of one country in the region on the European path would have a huge positive impact on the rest of the region. Albania and Montenegro are very well positioned to be the success story, and European Union wants to show that it's working And therefore, we also need the success. And then, of course, everyone will understand it's really happening. I don't think it's any mechanical transfer of issues between Kosovo and Bosnia-Herzegovina. I mean, each country, its own country and has its own challenges. And of course, one of the biggest challenges for the region is the normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia. European Union is responsible for this process since 2011. A lot has been done. But still, a lot remains to be done. I mean, we have an agreement which leads us there. We resolved the issue of energy. We achieved the recognition of ID cards, license plates. Two things. First, I don't feel that the two societies want to normalize the relations. So it looks like I had one meeting with the journalists from the region. I asked them, who wants normalization? And the answer was you, the European Union. So we cannot want the normalization more than Kosovo and Serbia. I mean, this is not, we are here to facilitate, but not to force it. So that means it's really, I would wish to see the societies telling their leaders, we don't want this confrontation. We want normal life. We want open borders. We want to meet with people. We want to study, to trade, like it is the case in Europe. Finally, the issue of bias. What I hear in Belgrade is I'm against Serbia. What I hear in Pristina, I'm against Kosovo. I have learned long ago that the Balkans don't recognize the notion of neutrality. There is no neutrality. You are either with me or against me. So that means this is part of the job, that you are constantly accused of being biased. But with the permanent scrutiny of the 27 member states, with the permanent communication with the Queen, with the daily communication with the United States, this is the best guarantee that you really have to stay in the middle. That means bear the risk of being accused of being biased by both sides. We don't do this for us, we do it for the future of Kosovo and Serbia and the region, because European Union will not import unresolved problems. And therefore, if you want to make the European dream a reality, you should insist on normalizing the relations, and we are here to help.
Milica.
Well, you talked about bias, but previously you complained that relationships in Europe are plastic and these are real. So these are real relationships. People always have to say something and to complain. I think it's a catch-22 situation. In order for conditionality to be successful, people need to trust that the process will continue and that there is a reward. And if they don't trust that the process will go on, then they will not engage in a way that will resolve the problem. I would return to what I said in my initial intervention, and this is that the internal reform driver on internal wish to resolve problems is really important. So one aspect is to think we need this for the European Union, for the integration to be unblocked, or we need the other is this really casts a long shadow over the region, makes life more difficult. What is it that we can do within our respective spheres of existence to make this, to resolve this problem? And I think with this attitude, probably even the outcome with the European integration would be different. That being said, and we had a panel on enlargement in the morning, and a lot of talk about a momentum in the European Union enlargement with Ukraine and Moldova starting their accession talks. And while I think that it's great for the Balkans that there is a renewed interest in the enlargement process, we can benefit from this momentum, and Ukraine and Moldova can benefit from a cohort where if you have a cohort, you are not so easily becoming a hostage of a veto process as it might happen in a one-on-one relationship. But at the same time, I think it's important to recognize the different drivers of these processes in the Balkans and in Ukraine and Moldova. In the Balkans, what was the rationale behind enlargement was extending the zone of peace and stability and reconciliation among countries that were at war. not the notion of a shared enemy, but reconciliation among former warring partners, so as to extend the zone of peace and stability. In case of Ukraine and Moldova, which are driving the momentum, it's a defensive enlargement. It's not about the reconciliation. It's prevailing over what is perceived as shared enemy. And these are different things, so we can benefit from this momentum if we engage with it with some sort of internal drive to resolve the issues or to revive the reform momentum. And of course, I'm always for the European Union being more innovative, more creative in employing the instruments of the enlargement process. But I think after 24 years, I think also I'm more open in looking internally how to incentivize this process to ultimately resolve things which are most critical for people who live in the region.
Okay, Nika?
So basically, like, my position here is different for, like, my generation. Like, I'm the first generation who wasn't born in Yugoslavia, like, in my country. I don't have any historic memory of Yugoslavia as it is, like, as a kid. European Union was a fact for me because, like, I was a kid when we entered the European Union, and we are dealing with different stuff. Like, I feel often angry that European Union doesn't do enough when we have, like, a terrible genocide happening, that European Union doesn't do enough when it comes to workers' rights, then the European Union doesn't do enough when it comes to the things which are happening around. So I also think that, yes, it is like a promise, and it is important that we take it as it is, and that we remind ourselves again and again what kind of values European Union should have, but in reality, it's not just this. It's also like things which are not okay. And I think one of the strong points after this lab, where I was spending 2 days with amazing people fighting for, I don't know, marginalized women, like democracy, against corruption. Like, for me, one of the high hopes lives in people doing concrete stuff, fighting for concrete values, and like trying to push things to other direction. And I think that this is something that I hold on. This is something that I see as a hope. Yeah.
Ariam.
Well, a quick reflection on this. I lived in Pristina in 1999-2000. I turned 20 in Pristina. I remember that birthday was like crazy. So that means I also have a bias of living in Pristina right after the war, witnessing a lot of the crimes, friends with a lot of the leadership that came out of the KLA. So I'm speaking from a biased position here. There's no doubts about it, because my sentiments, my feelings are involved. But my only concern is, you know, since that time when I was in Pristina and Kosovo being the youngest nation in Europe, almost half of the population was born after the war. In Albania, which is the second youngest country in Europe and capital, more than half of the people were born after the fall of communism. And somehow, for this younger generation, like for the progressive, young, future half of the population, the frame is still the past. And here, I think, if you are a leader, it doesn't matter, you're a leader of a city, of a region, of a European Union, of a country, your job is to frame the narrative. And if you are showing people a Polaroid picture, just black and white, and dividing people between black and white, are you against normalization or pro-normalization? Then, you know, leadership does really matter. Some of us think only the Balkans have conflict. There was a war here in Innsbruck, and the Tyroleans were fighting the King of Bavaria. The King of Bavaria called Napoleon. The Tyroleans called the Austrians. They were having a war here. And, you know, initially it was about the invasion, it was land, it was about conscripts of soldiers serving the Bavarian king. 200 years ago I'm talking about. And you know what really sparked the war? The insistence of the King of Bavaria to vaccinate against smallpox, the Tyrolean population. That really pissed them off because it was blasphemy. It's 2024 in America, they're still ready to open a war about vaccination. So all I'm saying is there's nothing new under the sun. I know everybody thinks, oh, but sui generis, you don't understand us Albanians because we're from Mars. No. Everything has happened before. And sometimes the mistake we make is that the only thing we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. Because we are sitting here in a place that was washed with blood, again, about the same stupid debates that we have today about vaccination. So once you understand that and you realize that it was leadership, and that's why I tell people, say, look, if you want to be a conference veteran, you can go to Alba for the rest of your life, and you'll be fine. But if you want to make a change, go into politics, because that's where you make a decision how a city goes, how a country goes. And I think it's the responsibility of leaders to make sure that their narrative is not monochromatic. Only this negotiation, other than this, we do nothing. We freeze everything else. There's so much more to life. Sure, borders are important, but there's so much more within borders and between borders that is happening. And here I think that both leaders or political groups have a responsibility for narrowing this conversation just on this issue. As much as I am a critic of the European Union, I mean, it took the war in Ukraine to really wake up and realize that, that we don't have our own border secure. We don't have a European army. Like Nixon used to say, if I want to call Europe, who do I call? You know, who's the leader in Europe that picks up the phone and, you know, gets Europe to collaborate? And if you think you have it worse in our region, you know, think of someone who your age in Moldova or Georgia or even worse, Ukraine. So I am not here to soothe and give you a chill pill. All I'm here to say is that, look, whatever is happening has happened before, and only solid leadership has sorted it out. Second, this is a great crisis, but it's also a great opportunity. What is happening in Ukraine is a terrible crisis. But with that heavy price, it woke up the rest of the European Union and said, my goodness, we have our own little ghetto called the Balkans that we need to make sure, you know, it's within our ranks. And I think those are my two modest remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I want to reinforce this point because it's extremely important. I mean, you don't elect your politicians to change the past. I mean, you expect them to change your future. So don't let them live out of the past and to divide the nations based on the past. Second, it's been 29 years since the end of the war in Bosnia, 25 since the end of the conflict in Kosovo. Project this on Europe. Can you imagine Europe, 1970 or 74, living out of the memory of the World War II, and the Germans and the French going around blaming each other, pointing fingers? What would be today of the European project? So this is really important to turn the page and focus on the future.
Thank you very much, and I will abuse my position as moderator to add my 2 cents to this issue. I think it's very important what all of you have said, both the leadership issue. We elect leaders really to resolve our problems and to take us into a better future. But also the fact that, as Arian rightly reminded us, I mean, this is a typical European story. There's nothing special about Albanians and Serbs and their problems in the past and the present and the future. You look at Northern Ireland, for example. It took an American senator to find the compromise between 2 democratic countries called Ireland and the United Kingdom for the Good Friday Agreement. And I was in Northern Ireland just in April with my fellows. They still have a wall between the Catholics and in one part of the city. You can go around other streets and go to the other side, but they close a gate every night. Several gates in Northern Ireland. In fact, with Hedvig, we were there together. Secondly, and we need to mention it, about leadership, the Greek and North Macedonian prime ministers found the courage, Alexis Tsipras and Zoran Zaev, to resolve an issue. 27 years Greece was blocking Macedonia to enter NATO and to continue its path towards the European Union. They decided to do this historic, difficult compromise against the will of the public opinions of Greece and North Macedonia. There were hundreds of thousands of Greeks in Thessaloniki and Athens protesting against the compromise. Likewise in Skopje and other cities in Macedonia against Zaev accepting this. They did something hugely courageous, very European, and they showed to be true leaders, and now there is a resolved issue. Why am I saying this? Because a British sociologist, Bernard Crick, talked about the high price of peace. Every side has to give something to find that compromise. You cannot stay on your maximalist positions. You have to move closer to a middle ground. And that's why it's the high price of peace. You cannot have in a new historical situation positions that you had in the situations that prior to that was different. And that's what we're expecting of our leaders and are not delivering between Belgrade and Pristina, Serbia and Kosovo. I worked for a prime minister called Zoran Đinđić more than 20 years ago now, who came into the office and every day and said, we need to resolve the Kosovo issue as quickly as possible because this is what is impeding us on our European and democratic road. He said, you cannot live with a problem, like in families or like in personal relationships. Yeah, you can live with a problem, but it's not healthy. And that's the problem that we have. We're not living a healthy life between the two of our nations and the two of our countries. And somehow, slowly, things have happened. Miroslav Lajčák just explained everything that has been achieved, and a lot has been achieved. The international telephone number for Kosovo, I remember there were debates in Serbia that all Serbia will rise if Kosovo gets an international telephone. The day it got, this was not news. So what I'm saying is public opinion, which is the majority, accept these things. They see the reality. And that's why leaders have to actually say what is real instead of mythologically talking about some things. And I think that we can do it. And final word, because I think we could all talk about this till tomorrow morning, is that we need to be each other's champions. We all want the same thing. We want to join the European Union, which basically, more importantly, means we want to become normal democratic countries where I can have a decent salary and where I can go off for a holiday and not to worry about, what else is happening. And that is what people want. They want this kind of what we used to call normal, boring life. That is what is not happening when you have an unresolved situation in your family, in your region. And that is why, to go to the question on Bosnia, these are unrelated things, but they reverberate, just as the solution of the Macedonian name gave a positive momentum. And there was pressure on Serbia, okay, if the Macedonians have solved this, now we need to solve this because this is the European way. And this is the little caveat and criticism of Europe. That was cut short by France's decision not to give Macedonia a date. And we were all rightly furious because they had done the hard European work to find a compromise, and then a European country said, well, no. You can't go forward. And that is what creates some of the bad blood and disgruntlement and loss of trust and of the credibility. And finally, I think that is why now the European Union rightly is pushing for a win, a deserved meritocratic win to bring in a Montenegro and an Albania as quickly as possible because they have done the hard work. And that would give credibility again to the process. And that is why I think many of us are cheering and hoping, with all the problems that these societies have, nobody says they're perfect, but at least they're showing the willingness and the leadership to move forward. Okay, questions again, comments. I see hands right here, 3 in the front row and then 1 at the back and over there. But let's take these 3 here first. And do introduce yourselves, please.
Thank you. I'm Anna. I'm from Macedonia, so thank you for bringing up the dispute we have with Greece. Our country has been a candidate for EU membership since 2005, so almost 2 decades now. And I think it's important to mention that the conditions for the other countries, for example, Slovakia, were very much different from the conditions we have now for Macedonia. And my question is, how do you see the process in the future?
Okay, next question, next to you somewhere there. Yeah.
Hello, Sabina Jurčeni, Albanian citizen, but I live and work in Vienna. I'm a researcher on social policies. So I just want to address another elephant in the room. I mean, while talking about the Balkans, we can all agree there's plenty of elephants we can see. So we heard a lot about youth participation. We are the moment, we are the future, and all of this. But what about youth mass migration in the Western Balkans? In all the countries, like we can open a couple of statistics, we can see that there's more and more young people going to the EU countries. I mean, as I see it, it's twofold. First, is the EU is responsible because of their aging population. They want to fill in their labor force for jobs that only concern the service sector. I want to emphasize this as well. And on the side of the Western Balkan governments, it appears that they don't have enough appealing conditions, options, possibilities for young people. So here we are with a Western Balkans whose youth is shrinking by the day. So what are we going to do about it? When I say we, I mean, what is the European Union going to do about it? What is the Western Balkan countries going to do about it? Because then I think participation is sort of unrealistic if we're not there. And I myself, I'm not there either. That's where it comes from. Yeah.
Could you pass it down the row? There was a third question in that row.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anastasia Georgia, as well, from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Just to add up on the previous question, so basically, we are very well aware that we are living here in this activism bubble. We are the people who are all for democracy, and we understand how Western Balkans function and what is the future. My question is, what do we do with our peers that we are very well aware of at our universities, high schools, that are becoming more and more nationalistic? And those are the future citizens of the Western Balkans. So although we fight here and we do understand the processes, many of them, they're judge us for what we are doing here, not understanding that this is the right way to mediate the processes. So that's what I'm personally worried about, and especially I want to highlight the fact, for example, when I visited Tirana for the first time during the European Youth Capital Days, it was very healing for me to visit Albania, to see how also just how developed it is after all these years. So this is just my question. How do we give more opportunities to just normal kids who are not interested in politics, who will have some other professions? How do we help them integrate in all these processes? Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Nika first.
Yeah, I will be quite harsh here. So basically for us, like in Slovenia, like before every single elections, we had these long debates, who did what in transition, like, and in the stage of the independence. And when we went like around the universities, around the cities, people my age and younger people said to me, we don't care what happened before. We don't have apartments, we are paying 600 euros for a room in Ljubljana, we live with 3 other people, we have precarious jobs, we don't know how we will pay the bills at the end, we do not know how our future will look like, we have a feeling that we cannot say what we want to say in Slovenia, and we have a feeling that we lost the hope of tomorrow. And the truth is that we had tear gas on the street, we had huge protests, we have totally different government that we have now, and European Union did not do a lot around it. And the truth is that also European Union, when you are part of European Union, that doesn't do a lot about certain issues. In Poland, women are still being killed in hospitals because of restrictive abortion laws, which doesn't happen in any other countries, even like in underdeveloped Balkans. So what we realized in Slovenia is that we need to bully a little bit the politicians in a way that we get self-organized, that we go from city to city, from village to village, that we demand a future, that we demand like apartments, that we demand like working conditions, that we demand life full of dignity, and that we in one moment stop caring on which side was someone, for which party someone voted, but we care about concrete issues. And the sad reality is that if we won't do it, no one will do it for us. Not bureaucrats in Brussels, I promise you, they won't do it. Not people in high positions. You need to somehow push them, and when they do something right, we need to celebrate them. And for us, the secret is that when politicians do good, we will be with them, and when they don't do good, we will demand something else. And I think that our responsibility is that in one moment we say, it's enough of this shit, we want to talk about the future, we want to talk if we will be brave enough to have families, if we will have economic conditions to have families, and that we sadly do things on our own. Because no one will do it for us, because otherwise things would be already done.
Thank you.
So I had your same dilemma, but it was a while back. It was a while back because I like to think of myself as a patriot, but not a nationalist. I mean, I love my country, but I don't hate other countries. And I think that's the big difference there. But I also think you can be a patriot anywhere you are. But also think you can be a better professional because of international experiences. Yesterday I was sharing with my friends in Poland about when I lost my father in '91. Albania had not opened yet, just like the first embassies were cracking. Of course, I was very sad at the funeral because it was my father. I was 10. I didn't have much time with him. But the second saddest thing is that I could not fathom how someone 39, 40-year-old had never left the country. So many of us grew up with this, the ability to leave, to find out how big the world is. So that sentiment, I think, is still alive today. I think I'm a better mayor because I studied in the US and the UK. But I also lived 2 years in Pristina. But I also lived a year in Rwanda. I got to see how Bolsa Familia and the social assistance program used to work in Brazil. And also how mass transit is really important, this bus reform that we're doing now, which I learned actually in Bogota with the Transmilenio and Enrique Peñalosa. So I think anyone from the region who lives and gains experiences is actually an asset. I am sure when you decide to come, you will be a lot more valuable. Not that you were a lesser person before, but you're definitely a bigger person now. You're rich with experiences. You come back with a network. There are a few things that government should do, and this is where I will then take some responsibility. In the last census in the region, because every 10 years, Tirana is the only city that is growing at this rate, 20,000 people, 25,000 a year. Everybody else is losing. In our 61 municipalities, all the other 60 are losing, we're the only one gaining. But we're not only gaining Albanians. Tirana now is home with residence permits to 144 nationalities. When I was a kid, looking at the Marxist tourist was, a big event. And now to live in a cosmopolitan place, it feels like visiting the Tower of Babel every time you're in Skanderbeg Square. So I have the opposite problem of a city that is growing and the rest of a city that is shrinking. But to their defense, so is Puglia and so is Sicily. Southern Italy, in percentage-wise, has a bigger problem than the actual Balkans. Southern Spain is the same. All of Africa is going there. Central Asia, all is coming to Europe. So the gravity of jobs that pay better, of the allure and the magnetism that Rich Society's project is very, very powerful. And I feel it in Tirana. I get other mayors who say, geez, don't do all these events and all these things because now everybody wants to come to Tirana. We have no young people. I was talking to Federica Mogherini today, who's our wonderful rector of the College of Europe. But tomorrow we're opening the College of Europe in Tirana. I would have never thought that I'd live the day that a campus of College of Europe after Bruges and Natolin and Poland, the third one for the region would be in Tirana. And now we're hosting, students from 21 nationalities who will come to become the future Eurocrats and diplomats and so on and so forth. So I think there are examples out there. But if I were to give some tips to other mayors, and when I do, Yoleza is here. She's a young member from our city council. We made a quota in our list for the city council that a third of all the list, not the winning, but the actual list that gets into the city council, a third is under 30. And people said, these kids will never be of any use. They were. This is how we got free student bus transport. The city subsidizes 50% of all the dormitories, even for students. Dormitories are usually for students who are not from the city. But since 90% of them will stay in Tirana, we're giving them a helping hand from the get-go. We were talking about the housing situation. We give 1,000 soft loans. Basically, we pay the interest and young families only pay the principal. So 1,000 families get an early start. I think they are not magical solutions, but I think many cities and many mayors with the political list and participation, we are here talking about the future. When I was a kid, one of the few communist, one of the few international movies that was allowed was that movie called Return to the Future. I don't know if you remember, with Michael J. Fox, MJ Fox. And the future in the film was 2015. So the future was almost a decade ago. And I think it's up to us to design the future now. And I'll finish with a story. I was in Hanover. We're trying to promote a big economic zone in Tirana. We're transferring the largest data center from Israel and a few other things. So I'm always looking for clients to bring for new jobs, not textile and shoes. So I go to Hanover and I meet an old friend of mine from Vlora, which is this beautiful town in the Mediterranean, south of Albania. And I remember her from our debate days, all part of the Soros Mafia, of course, and the conspiracies. And she had a dream. She wanted to become a doctor. And I said, so how's it going? She said, I had both my dreams fulfilled. I became a doctor and I became a doctor in Germany. And then she said, you won't believe what happened on my first day. So she said, I went to Hanover Hospital. I start the first day. We have our 3 surgeries, early in the morning, 1 hour each. By midday, we have our lunch break. And I'm sitting for my first lunch break with my doctor friends from Hanover. And one friend is telling the other, my goodness, you know what I saw? In Vlora, there's this place in Albania, which is really, really nice. We should all save money and go there. And then she realized my dream was to have their life. Their dream is to save so they could have my life. I used to wake up every day in Vlora watching the beautiful sunset by the beach. So it's all relative, and I think it's okay for people to travel, for people to experience, and for people to build networks and get knowledge. They can become, like I said, Mira Murati will probably be useless in Vlora. But now as the CTO of ChatGPT and OpenAI, she probably has a lot more use for Albania and the rest of the world. So the question is, how can you be a patriot with this talent without living actually in the country? Well, you probably know, Edi Rama has shared this. We are now asking her to do the adaptation of our EU legislation. If it took Croatia 7 years, she should take us with AI 1 year to do the translation and adaptation into law. So I would not be disheartened for people who are abroad and are getting all this great expertise and experience, because they can still be useful either physically or wherever they are as professionals. And I'm sure you will.
The Macedonia question.
I'll take it, yes. First, the Macedonian question. People don't remember that Macedonia was the very first country in the Balkans who signed the Stabilization Association Agreement with the European Union back in 2001. And then I was in the room 2005 when Macedonia and Croatia were granted candidate status. And Croatia celebrated 10 years of membership last year, and Macedonia is still waiting to start. And the responsibility lies with us. That's very clear, mostly, and it's a shame. However, I'm trying to be managerial, so I don't like to complain. I try to look for solutions. What's the solution? Respect Prespa. Don't put your relationship with Greece in danger. It took so many years to mend it, preserve it. And second, do this one thing that you have to do to resolve the problem with Bulgaria. That means these constitutional amendments. And our part of the task would be to make sure that this is the very last. And there is no shortcut. It will not disappear. Whoever is promising that will renegotiate, they don't know what they are talking about. But this must be done. But our responsibility must be that this is it. And after that, you start accession negotiation, which is long overdue and very well deserved. My second point on the second and the third thing is, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, European future for the Balkans was a cliche. Nobody believed in it. Now it's a reality. There is a new momentum. Paradoxically, this new momentum was not created by the Balkans or for the Balkans. The momentum was created by Mr. Putin with his aggression against Ukraine, where European Union acted as one, and we decided to invite Ukraine and Moldova to join the European Union, which opens the door for the Balkans as well, logically, because Balkans are already part of the process. So Ukraine opens the door for you, but Ukraine will not get you in. Whether Ukraine will get in, that's a different story, but this is a unique opportunity. So this is not about a cliche. And what we need to do now is to get the politicians into a sandwich in a way in between two pressures. The one pressure is from us, from the European Union, deliver. Deliver, if you are serious, deliver. This is what you need to do, these reforms, and you need to deliver. So they have to be under very close scrutiny from the European Union, and at the same time, they need to feel the pressure from you, from the population. You need to demand that this process is transparent and hold them accountable. This is the only way how to turn this momentum into new reality. If this momentum is gone, I cannot guarantee that there will be another one in next 20 years. So don't miss it.
Okay, yes.
I wanted to take the migration question. I think the issue of outward migration was something that new EU member states also grappled with. It's now a concern for Croatia, was a concern at time for Poland. I live in a country where a proverbial Polish plumber was one of the red scares during the Brexit debate. What the data shows is that even when country becomes an EU member, outward migration continues until GDP reaches a certain threshold where people start returning, and then you start benefiting from what Arion is mentioning, expertise and basically circular migration, other people coming. So, and while you're waiting for this to happen, there is a data which shows that it's partly, outward migration is partly, the reason is economic circumstances, but it is also partly feeling that you are unable to get your voice heard and your needs addressed by the institutions in your country. One of the transition reports that the EBRD did before COVID, if I'm not mistaken, that was 2019, was on governance. And one of the governance dividends was that marginal improvements in quality of governance in, say, Albania would, if monetized, be valued by people as $400 increase per annum. So the other reason where people would be motivated to stay if they were to see an improvement of this sort, and this means national, subnational. A lot of problems that people have are subnational, which actually Arion addresses in Tirana, water, wastewater, and similar issues, is life satisfaction. And if you feel that the corruption gap is narrowing and that your voice is heard, that your needs addressed, you feel richer, sort of this, the equivalent of having more money, but it also brings more satisfaction. So I think it would be not accurate to say that the minute we join the European Union, the migration would stop. It would continue because there would be an enhanced opportunity to do so. But the road to membership and the membership itself would have opened a lot of economic opportunities for GDP to grow, to create more attractive environment for return. To my despair, all of the Polish plumbers have left the UK because they have currently more beneficial life in Poland than in the UK. There are still a lot of people from the Balkans, not just Western Balkans, but Balkans generally, thankfully, otherwise it would be really difficult to get some of the things done in the UK. But basically, membership is not going to reverse the situation. Using this to leverage economic opportunities will. Still people will be leaving, but a lot of them will be coming back. In the meanwhile, use the improvements both in the economy and in governance to create these intangible improvements which are likely to keep people in.
Okay, last round. I have Hedvig first here. And over there then, could we get a microphone? Yeah.
It's on.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and take all the questions, but Hedvig first.
Hello everyone, I'm Rostomi from Georgia. My question
No. No, first here and then there.
Hedvig Morway from the Erste Foundation. Well, just to refer shortly, and I'm grateful Nika and Milica mentioned the lab, what we organized 2 days ago, together with the OSI, Western Balkans, and with the idea of trying to dig deeper about figuring out where is hope in our region, where are the hidden potentials which could give people the confidence that they should remain in their countries, that they should strengthen their countries, they should develop their societies. So following up on what Milica was saying, so that under the given circumstances we live, I mean, we know in what countries we live, what is the political situation, what's the economic situation, we know what's globally happening, we know what is the European accession process, and the intention was to figure out, and what now? What now? And I'm so happy that Nika was referring to this need for activism, and I'm also very grateful that Arian was telling the examples of how, once you are in power, actually how you can use it really for good things. So my question is, first my point, yes, we can talk about the EU integration, and we discuss the region in this framework of the EU accession, but it is not the magic pill. Even after the region will become all the countries members of the EU, not all problems will disappear. And I think Nika, who actually grew up in the EU and she works in the EU and she's an activist in the EU, can explain to us how difficult it is for her to live in a country where, again, problems exist, and that is what motivates her for activism. So my point is, we have to be engaged, and as Miroslav was saying, as Milica was saying, create this demand inside and the reform potential strengthened inside the region and these countries in order to really succeed. So my question to all the panelists is, if you could name one potential or one positive area of development where you see that immediately something can be activated so that the people see the hope and that they feel that there is a perspective which is positive. Thank you.
Thank you. Over there, then the Georgia person.
I'm Rostomi from Georgia, and my question goes to Mr. Arion. How do you think, is corruption biggest problem in Albania or not? And if yes, what is done to be defeated corruption? Thanks.
Okay, then there were questions here. Let's go to the front row here. Yeah, sure. Please keep your questions brief.
Okay, yeah. I'm Luka from Serbia. Actually, I just want to second the conversation we had about youth and living. I completely agreed with Nika and with Arion. It's not about do people leave, it's about do they want to come back and what kind of society are they coming back to. And actually, I had a question regarding the lithium mining in Serbia. But as a bit and positive person I am, I know this would be a real downer to end on, so I'm not gonna do it. But we can, yeah, but we can talk about it later,
Okay,
please.
so behind you, someone had a question.
Hello, my name is Ilya. I come from Montenegro, and I have a question about. We are talking a lot about the green transition in Western Balkans. So we'd like to hear your view on what are some of the major political factors that can influence this transition in order to kind of delay, and also from the perspective of Tirana, do you have any plans in order to transition to kind of more sustainable way of tourism? Thank you.
Okay, and then over there.
Hello everyone, I'm Danka from Speak Up Group. I just want to say a few things about Speak Up Group. This is project of Austria and United States, and one group of young people from Bosnia and Herzegovina came here at Alba for the first time. I just want to emphasize that this group is example how we can do actually reconciliation, and we can give some good ideas and make some first steps. But it is not my question. I just wanted you to know context why we came here. At Albach. The question and the question of the group is for Mr. Lajcak primarily, but also for everyone else. What do you think, what is the main problem in process of joining European Union? Main problem from side of Bosnia and from the other side? What do you think, how we can find a way to go out from this blocked situation and this kind of crisis in going toward the EU? And important question, actually in the context of Speak Up Group, is what young people, young leaders, activists or politicians or others who want to improve our society and who want to make some steps toward the EU faster, what we can do in that context of joining EU. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to the panel. Miro, do you want to start this final round?
Okay, I'll meet with your group tomorrow, so we'll have that chance to discuss Bosnia in detail. Of course, the functionality of the country is a major problem for Bosnia-Herzegovina, and also how to preserve the multi-ethnic and multinational character of Bosnia-Herzegovina, but depart from the Dayton Constitution, because that's preventing the country from meeting the European standards. That's very clear. One sentence on lithium. I mean, you are blessed with having the lithium. It's a huge gift, and there are so many competitors for that. And the best thing that could happen to Serbia is to sign this contract with the European Union, because the European Union guarantees the highest environmental and other standards. You could have signed this contract also with China, and I'm not sure that the standard would have been the same. So it is a huge opportunity. Finally, Hedvig, one thing that I want to mention, and Ivan mentioned at the beginning, regional cooperation. Because no one prevents you from improving the regional cooperation, and this would be the best proof that you can exist in a wider environment. If you can work together as a region, this is a very powerful message to the European Union that you will be also able to work in the family of 27 and plus. So don't underestimate, on the contrary, focus on regional cooperation, remove the obstacles that are still there.
Thank you, Miro. Milica.
I'll first take the question, Hedvig's question about one idea, and I think I'm going to repeat the idea that I had in the lab, and I will abuse the fact that we have Arion here, who was talking about the pyramid, and we also had one of the tech entrepreneurs from Kosovo in the lab, and I would say something like regional apprenticeship or internship scheme, which, you know, maybe it can be in the area of tech jobs, it can be in the area of green jobs. It would first allow young people to get exposure to whether it is vocational or any professional qualification, which makes it easier for them to get onto the labor market, because oftentimes people leave, they can't get a job because they're in a vicious circle of not being able to get a job because they don't have work experience, and then they can't have work experience, so this would help. But would also serve creating networks in the region, enhancing this love for region as a whole, finding things that we share, things that we can learn from each other. But I think would just be at the heart of what I see this regional market, being able to exploit opportunities for professional and vocational opportunities across the region. And it can be done through private sector initiative. The second question, green transition and what would need to happen for the green transition. I think the Western Balkans as a region is quite seriously hit by the climate change. We have several countries where the quality of air is the lowest. Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina burn coal, lowest quality lignite. It's quite evident in the quality of air. Floods are a frequent occurrence. This summer in Serbia you had 4 bouts of temperatures around 40 degrees. So a debate is due in the region. What do we think is a green transition? What we see as an alternative sort of energy? What sort of benefit costs, partners, places, our place in global value chain, we sort of associate with this. For this debate to happen, there needs to be a space to have a debate. There needs to be a space to have a debate. There needs to be a media to have a debate. And there needs to be institution and trust in the society that there will be a process in the end of which you will have a shared understanding of where you're going, and certain standards associated with this will be upheld. But this debate is overdue and needs to happen in the whole region.
Okay, Nika.
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe the most important thing that we can do is to show the people that their voice matters, that if they sign something, if they do something, like a change will be there. Because I think apathy is coming from the fact that when you go to vote or when you sign a petition, things don't change and that you wasted your time. So I think that like my dream is to have like a united Balkan project, maybe connected with housing or with one of the everyday issues of people, finding inspiration in good practices, like maybe Tirana has it, and like just change something together on different national levels and establish a connected community who can then push things further. I think this is the only solution that we have to work our asses off and try to change something.
Last but not least.
So, plenty of good news out there. I think, I remember 10 years ago, I was a Minister of Youth and Social Affairs, and I was implementing what the diplomats were agreeing. And one of the agreement of the Berlin process was to open RICO, the Regional Youth Cooperation Office, centered in Tirana, based on the Franco-German, Polish-German youth exchanges, first with the Albanian-Serbian youth exchanges, and now to see, especially now in the summer, 2 to 3 flights a day between Tirana and Belgrade. Now Tirana and Zagreb have, we suffered because the capital of the Balkans was Vienna. Everybody had to go up and then first come to see your neighbors. That is beginning to change. And I'm really excited also to see with North Macedonia, North Macedonia, the highway projects between Tirana and Pristina is just a 2-hour drive now. That is a very positive change. Interconnectivity, but especially not our grandparents' generation, but the younger generation. I find that super exciting. Second, we're now doing jobs of the future. We realized, at least in City Hall in our administration, this city is not going to make Mercedes and BMWs, but it can code. And if a Swedish child is doing Scratch already at preschool at 6, there's no reason why a Balkan kid, who also tends to be more agile and more street smart, cannot also do code and not also be digitally literate. And that's why we adopted digital literacy as a basic human right for every kid who's born in our city, that the city pays for. This issue of tourism, again, we realize we're not going to be Turkey. We're not going to do the ultra all-inclusive, eat as much as you can buffet. But our ruggedness, the virgin beaches, the adventure, some of the craziness from communism, like the bunkers, the #1 attraction in Tirana now is the underground bunkers, which we all hated because it reminded us of a brutal past, but apparently tourists love them and they're willing to pay for it. So in that sense, we are seeing a lot of positive change. Now, when it comes to some of the outstanding issues, our friend from Georgia, I also happen to have spent a lot of time in Georgia. Good friend of mine and a famous Milan player, Kaka Kaladze, is the mayor of Tbilisi, and then, of course, Batumi and a few others. And there the conversation is, again, how do you run massive administrations in countries where people, to get things a bit quicker, you have to have a connection or a bit of money will oil the machinery of bureaucracy and you deliver. So I will give you one example of the energy transition and also how do you fight corruption. We had the worst fleet of taxis. I mean, this is all beat up cars. The love of an Albanian for the automobile is Shakespearean. It's because we didn't have private property and cars, so to go to Italy and bring the worst Fiat possible or a beat up 190, 240D Mercedes was an achievement. It was almost like a trophy. It was away. I mean, the coffee house was still 100 meters away, and the bakery still 50 meters away. But now you go with the automobile, you know, almost like an Olympic medal that you carry around just to show your neighbors you're not a poor communist anymore. So we wanted to change the fleet of taxis, but we didn't have the European money. So we needed to find an incentive, but also to not carry on with the corruption on how people were getting licenses. So we tweaked the rule and we said, look, if you bring an electric car, you get a license within 24 hours and you apply online. But if you want to wait for 5 years until someone retires from their usual taxi, then you're free to wait with your dirty old car, and then whenever one opens a medallion, then you can get one. In 3 years, 85% of our fleet, whosoever has been in Tirana can testify, is electric, and we never meet these people. It's all done online. So I think there's two very important binaries where this train can ride. Rule of law. Albania has adopted, if I may call it, one of the most draconian legal systems. You think Croatia and Romania had a story, you have to read about Albania. Mayors, members of parliament, ministers are now in jail. This was a conscientious choice. It was not being forced on. We made a choice, also agreeing that some of our peers, some of our colleagues, some of our members would go behind bars. And I think the draconian, the guillotine or the hanging of the medieval times still projects a sense of fear on public officials to not go overboard and to have a system that will always hold you responsible, no matter what your name is, how important you are, whatever. But that is not enough. I know countries who've had brutal and draconian legal system, the corruption is still ripe. Because to the average Joe is the petty corruption, the everyday thing. We seized the opportunity of COVID, where people could not get out and we were in quarantine. And then we started developing apps. First, the app of who can get out and what time. That you could show to the police that this is your breathing time for that 1 hour. And then apps of food delivery. And then apps of mobility. We went from the worst place in the Balkans, now, modesty aside, number one. 98% of the services, if you come to visit me, which I hope you do, the City Hall of Tirana, there will be no one waiting in line anywhere. Most people now do everything digitally. Once you avoid that human interaction, where because you have a stamp and a signature, you can hold my life hostage for a permit or for this or for that, once you break this tie, and once you say, look, you get an index number, and that is the number of your case, which the system has to produce a response. In the city of Tirana, if you apply for a building permit, within 60 days, we either have to give you the response and get your taxes and the design correctly, or the system will automatically issue you the permit. And then we are in trouble, according to the law, because we didn't check and we let the system issue automatically. So we have a 60-day window to process everything, and that is the largest amount of time because it involves a building with details. Everything else is less than that. So I think, sure, a tough justice system, like the rest of Europe and the world, but mostly modernization, modernization, modernization. If you modernize and you don't let one human act like they hold the other person hostage because they have a stamp, like the Bolshevik way, and a signature, that is probably the best way to streamline a lot of the petty stuff that people get most frustrated about in public administration. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming. I think we got some good answers to Hedvig's question about one thing that could help. Very creative. I think rule of law basically encompasses some of them, and then regional cooperation. This is not something that you can do because somebody's asking. You can prove by yourself that you want to live with your neighbor in peace and do business and exchange. So thank you all for coming, and please join me in thanking our panel.